If you've ever landed at Kai Tak Airport and wondered about the smell out on the tarmac, you're not alone. The infamous Nullah has been emitting noxious fumes for more than a decade. But as Inside Story reports, it's causing more than a bad smell. It's literally grounded some of those who must work alongside the Nullah every day. And as we're about to tell you, it's also a problem for planned development, fueling debate on how best to deal with it once Kai Tak shuts down.
It is a problem that we would rather not have, both from a staff point of view and also, of course, from a point of view of welcoming our visitors to Hong Kong.
It's been going on for a long time. I remember when I was with Cathay, Prince Philip remarking to one of the pilots on the, who was at the controls, this was in the early 80s, "What is that terrible smell?"
That smell is hydrogen sulfide. The infamous Kai Tak Nullah has been releasing the gas for more than a decade.
The gases are produced by bacteria, which are degrading the polluting material. Because there's a lack of oxygen in the water, then these gases are produced. They're very odorous, and the most common one is hydrogen sulfide.
But is Hong Kong's situation quite unique?
Well, Hong Kong, we've had very, very rapid development. And, you know, maybe not enough money or attention was paid to the environmental aspects in the past, and is now catching up with us.
Factories, businesses and household sewage from the surrounding areas of Kwun Tong, Kowloon Bay, Wong Tai Sin and San Po Kong have been discharging toxic pollutants that have ultimately helped produce the gases, which are corrosive and defined as poisonous and unpleasant. One problem is that the stink has spoiled Hong Kong's greeting to its countless number of visitors, and the Nullah smell of rotten eggs has become an unwanted attraction.
Quite honestly, it's a situation that we wouldn't like to have here. I also believe it's not a sort of welcome that passengers really want to have when they arrive in Hong Kong. So certainly it's a feature of Hong Kong and it's a feature of Kai Tak that I would like to see go.
For the Government Flying Service, or GFS, its 100-plus strong staff have also been living with the problem.
We are fairly close to Nullah. We are probably 100 meters or so away from Nullah. And where we find it's the worst is on still hot days during the summer with no wind. In 1993 was my first squeal to the EPD, and I don't think that anything had been raised before that.
Wastewaters from, in some cases, from industry, from restaurants, from well, even domestic premises like temporary housing areas and so on, was getting into the rainwater system. Now that sewage master plan, the works associated with that are now well underway. The works have been carried out in 2 stages. The first stage will be complete early next year, early '97. And as part of that development, so far we've now removed 80% of the pollution.
The EPD says diverting water from the Shingmun Reservoir to the Nullah and pumping oxygen into the stagnant pool have reduced the foul odor. But it seems the gas's impact remained just as potent, attacking more than people's sense of smell.
The problem, as you know, is hydrogen sulfide, which comes off the Nullah. I'm not a chemist, but I know the effects of what it's had on our equipment. Primarily it affects the avionics side of the house. And within our maintenance budget, each year we have around about $4 million to look after the avionics section. That includes the aircraft maintenance, plus the ground radio stations we have, specialist equipment like infrared, night vision goggles. The equipment that we've had a lot of failures with is primarily an effect of the aircraft, and for example, last year we had to replace all of the 76 helicopters' radar systems, all of the 76 pitot heads. That came to about just under $4 million on itself just to do that. and that is strictly as a result of the effects of the Nullah that we've had on us.
Is it corrosion mainly?
Yes, it's corrosion, and it affects primarily the things like gold contact points we have in computers, silver, all the good metals, the expensive ones, right?
How much more maintenance work do you have to do?
Oh, it's substantial. We have to change some of the avionics parts in the aircraft up to 20 times the world average.
Repairs mean a big price tag, and most important, they must be carried out to the manufacturer's primary specifications.
It was made a decision at that time to, rather than just refurbish the equipment which we have, to go and get entirely new aircraft, new equipment, more modern.
Last July, the government approved its request for $140 million to buy 2 new aircraft. Search and rescue helicopters can cost anywhere from $70 to $170 million each. But the Nullah's harmful gases have exacted an even higher price.
初初我出去做嘅時候咧，我就唔懷疑嘅，係有一陣味咁樣嘅。但係慣咗啦，慣咗之後我就唔當一回事咁樣咯。咁我都唔發覺聞到㗎開始就，咁但係我就冇理到佢，咁跟住開始再做落去啦。咁開始冇耐，大概係2-3個月後度啦，就開始有啲咳出現啦，即係咳嗽出現啦。咁或者眼澀咁嘅情況出現嘅。
Out in Fan Ling, GFS crewman Go Chun Fan prepares for work. While many say the Nullah's odor has improved, the gases have grounded the 32-year-old who had no prior family history of breathing problems.
以為係一個普通嗰啲病徵咁樣，咳啊咁樣，咁去睇醫生咁樣咯。但係咧就都有成個月啦，即係食藥啦，即係成個月，咁都醫唔好啊，唔知點解。咁再經過醫生再寫支去專科診所咧，咁我再進行一啲測試啊，譬如吹氣測試啊、跑步啊、啲心電圖嗰啲測試啦咁樣，咁都發覺咧情況佢都即係都唔好明發生咩事㗎，個醫生，直至嗰個醫生就派啲人嚟呢度啦，抽查啲空氣樣本啊，同埋啲口水化驗咧，佢先懷疑到可能係出現啲硫化氫問題啦。
Under doctor's orders, Ko now is off the apron and indoors. Since the change, he says his health has gotten better. 你依家係咪要食藥？
暫時唔需要住咯，因為醫生講我就如果真係再咳翻啊，或者咩事發生先再食藥咯，或者再翻去覆診咁樣咯。咁 so far 嚟講，我覺得嚟到呢度咁耐嚟講咧，身體都冇乜問題發生過嘅而家嚟講。
At times, close to the Nullah itself, the concentrations were such that if someone was already suffering from a respiratory problem, then that level of hydrogen sulfide would aggravate that situation.
So it wouldn't actually cause one to have respiratory
It wouldn't cause someone who was normally fit and healthy, but someone who had a respiratory problem, it would be made worse by those levels. That was in 1990-91. Since then, there has been a number of improvements.
The EPD admits the levels at that time exceeded the World Health Organization's acceptable limit for the general population by more than 2 to 3 times. That doesn't take into consideration those who are exposed to the noxious fumes on a daily basis.
It is really Hong Kong. 10 years ago, you talk about the environment in LegCo or in government, you'd be shot down immediately by the people in charge. It's waste of time, etc. Hong Kong, I think, has built up its economy and prosperity based on a minimum of regulations. Now people have begun to recognize that this is a problem. The disadvantaged, the ones who have to live in these places, are now finding a voice. So what was not a problem, or what was something which people put up with, is now a problem that needs to be solved.
So where does the Nullah land on Hong Kong's environmental priority list? And how will the government deal with the problem once Kai Tak is closed? That's coming up. Welcome back to Inside Story. Earlier we told you about the hydrogen sulfide being released from the Nullah and its impact on the government flying services. But are there other things in the water we should know about? We now look at how far attempts have come in trying to resolve the problem and how far the government will have to go if it wants its big plans of redeveloping the area to go ahead.
You may be interested to know that the EPD told us that in the priority of pollution in Hong Kong, the Nullah is actually well down the list of priorities. And I found that quite astonishing because, of course, one is only, I suppose, to be frank, concerned about the problems as they affect you.
So what's the situation like now? According to the EPD, since 1993, the dissolved oxygen level for the Nullah decreased to 1.1 milligram per liter of water this year from 1.2 milligram. In unpolluted marine waters around Hong Kong, the typical oxygen concentration is about 7 milligrams per liter. In your opinion, has there been any real improvement since 1993 concerning the oxygen level for the Nullah?
Yes, there's a little bit of improvement, as the data has shown that in some position, the improvement is more like 100%, but the result is like 1 part per million of dissolved oxygen is still a little bit far from the regular oxygen level that you should find in seawater.
We wanted to see for ourselves just how strong the hydrogen sulfide was outside GFS, so we decided to put a piece of copper there. When we returned 24 hours later, this is what we found.
To me, it's unnatural. You are in close proximity to a gas that can cause all sorts of problems, as you've seen. This is a paper knife that I keep. This is actually was completely silver, but you can see the tarnish on it. So if it's doing that to a paper knife and hurting our airplanes, what does it do to one's lungs? Draw your own conclusions.
That's right. And you regularly...
Yes, I do. That's right. I do. I take silver polish and clean that off, and probably within about 2 or 3 days it becomes discolored again. So it's yes, I'm not a doctor, but I can guess.
Secure Air is also located near the Nullah, and it employs about 1,600 workers who check all the baggage at the airport with the help of at least 150 X-ray machines. A source has told Inside Story that around a third of Secure Air's employees have complained of breathing problems as a direct result of the Nullah's fumes. The source initially agreed to be interviewed on camera, but later changed his mind. And what about the impact on those who are on the government's payroll? Does that concern you at all, because you have 26,000 employees working at the airport?
Yes, obviously, if people are suffering in some way, I have no knowledge at all as to exactly what is causing those problems. Our own staff certainly have not complained at all. They have no problems as that I am aware of in this way.
As Inside Story found out, government testing so far has been confined to examining only levels of hydrogen sulfide. Tests for volatile organic compounds and aromatic hydrocarbons have never been carried out. What's their significance? They're on the United States Environmental Protection Agency's most hazardous list. We asked the EPD why it hasn't tested for these kinds of carcinogenics, or if it even planned to do so in the future. We were told that it didn't expect high concentrations of those compounds and that there was no point in doing long-term testing because it wasn't and isn't worth the time or resources. What kinds of compounds are on the EPA's most hazardous list?
There are a lot of compounds that's being regulated by the US EPA, such as the polyaromatic hydrocarbons, chlorinated hydrocarbons, and phenols, and pesticides, and it's a long list.
So far, the EPD says it has stepped up its testing of water samples since GFS complained of the fumes in 1993, from 12 times a year to 24. However, it revealed its air tests aren't continuous, admitting that the recent SNAP samples aren't even reliable.
We've done some more recent monitoring, but the monitoring has not been so comprehensive. It's not as reliable. It's been much more short-term. But that has indicated that the concentrations of the gases are lower.
While some may disagree with that assessment, what is clear is the Nullah problem is here to stay. There are big plans for the southeast Kowloon area, and once Kai Tak Airport shuts down for good, the government hopes to open up the area to massive development, which would include nearly 150 hectares devoted to private and public housing to accommodate up to 300,000 more people.
There are certain embayments, like, for example, Kowloon Bay, Kai Tak Nullah, the infamous Kai Tak Nullah. Now, these are highly polluted, and the reason why is that the sediments are full of toxic waste. And to leave those areas as they are, as virtually cesspools, would not be a terribly good thing to do. There's really no answer but to do some proper reclamation.
You can either leave the mud in place and reclaim on top, or you can remove the mud before you reclaim. To some extent, it's an engineering decision, which is the best method to use.
If it's contained, does it pose any risk in the long term? Let's say if you're going to have development on top of that area there.
Not really, because the mud is a form of earth, of soil. It's a natural material which has then become contaminated. Most of the contamination is organic, and most of that will have been depleted by the bacteria and so on.
Government commission consultants are trying to look for the best answer by examining the feasibility of development once the airport shuts down and Cheplakok is up and running, hopefully by mid-1998. But for now, many aren't breathing a sigh of relief just yet.
而家我所知，出邊同事咧都係幾擔心呢個問題存在嘅，我又唔好清楚即係邊一位同事真正可以受影響到咯。但係呢件事直接影響到大家我哋工作上嘅情緒咯，因為佢哋都幾即係會好似我咁樣。
I think it was all year round. It wasn't seasonal at all. It just depended on the wind direction. And we hope that when we go to Cheplakok, all these problems will be going away.